Good afternoon. It is Saturday the 25th of March. Tomorrow will be the fourth Sunday of Lent, otherwise known as Mothering Sunday and Mother's Day. It's been a beautiful warm day outside, bright skies, and just a mild breeze, nothing too terrible. This is Abingdon in Oxfordshire in the UK, about 7 miles due south of the city of Oxford. British summertime will begin tonight at 1 o'clock in the morning. We'll move to 2 o'clock in the morning until the last weekend of October, when the clocks will go back again to Greenwich Mean Time. My tea today is something I've never tried before. It's something called Dragonfly Tea, is the company, and Mountain Honeybush Organic Tea is the... Sorry, I'll just make so you can see the label. There we are. I'll talk more about this later on. It's very nice tea, I'm sure, but I will know more about it once I've had it. I'm using today my newly acquired teapot and mug set. You'll notice the finial on top here is a little watering can, and there's plants and a trowel on the teapot and a fork and another watering can there, and on the top it says "in the garden." I got this afternoon from ActionAid, which is a charity that helps women and children living in abject poverty in the developing world, and its projects focus primarily on helping them to get education and to be able to start providing for themselves and to help themselves out of poverty, out of extreme poverty, that is. I'd like to say thank you to you all for coming back to see me, and welcome to people who are joining us for the first time. I was very pleased to see that I'm now in double figures for my subscribers. That's very, very kind of you all to be subscribing. If you like this podcast, please remember to give it a thumbs up. If you are a new viewer, please remember to subscribe so that you'll be notified of future podcasts. I'm currently operating more or less on a weekly basis. So I tend to record on a Saturday, upload the video, carry out a few minor edits, and then it's live Saturday night, Sunday morning, depending upon how quickly YouTube processes the video. I don't like to edit the video, even as in last week when I clearly... There were several things last week. Obviously I was weaving for the first time, so that was taking some of my attention. But in fact, I had to record this podcast 4 times last Saturday, because for some reason the iPad kept switching itself off, but at different points in the podcast, and I wasn't sure where it had cut me off, and so I just decided to re-record. So as I'm speaking, I'm never quite sure, have I said this before in this podcast or in one of the other ones that I didn't keep. So that kind of explains why I didn't quite repeat myself, but I went over the same territory 2 or 3 times. Twice rather than 3 times, I think. Anyway, there we are. So, introductions, I guess. My name is Jared. I'm a crocheter and knitter, a weaver and sewer. Not yet very good at any of them, but very much enjoying the process of learning and enjoying creating as well, which is no mean thing. I work full-time, but I'm also a school governor. I'm the chair of our finance committee and vice chair of the governors for a very good primary school in Abingdon. And we've just had some very good news this week that the funding we need to be able to provide 2-year-old wraparound care provision for every 2-year-old in Abingdon has been approved, so work can begin on that after the Easter holiday, and by September we will have our first intake. We have a system where 15 hours per week per 2-year-old is available free, paid for by the state. and that's sufficient for many new parents to get them time to carry on studies or have a part-time job. But it's also, we will be able to provide, we have the capacity to provide 30 hours a week, plus before or after work care, or both. We already provide that kind of wraparound care from 7 o'clock in the morning till 6:30 in the evening for the older children in the primary school, and the 2-year-old provision, unlike normal school provision, will actually be through the summer months as well, so it doesn't stop just because the school holidays have begun. So we're quite excited. We're hoping that this will be a success and that it will increase the educational opportunities available to the children of Abingdon, as well as the work opportunities for their parents. So it's a very good thing. I have a blog which I have been terrible at updating, but I've made a resolution this week that I'm going to do better. So I will be adding a lot more entries over the next few weeks. That's at handmedowns.blog, but you'll see there's a link in the description below this video. I can also be found on Instagram and Ravelry and Facebook as Hand-Me-Downs, which has the E of me replaced by a 3 and the S of Downs replaced by a Z or a Z. And again, information is in the description box below this video. And there's also a Ravelry group where I put the show notes, so the information that I'm giving you, it will be in a written form, so that if there are any bits and pieces that you quite like the look of or the idea of, then you'll be able to find more out about them on the Ravelry page. I have one kind of finished object this week, which is the weaving that I was doing this time last week. Well, slightly earlier than this time last week, but so here's the full-length item. It's sorry, the other thing I kept saying last week was 2 yards equals 6 meters. What I meant, of course, was 2 yards equals 6 foot. 2 yards and 2 meters are more or less the same thing. Not quite, but more or less. So, sorry about that. I completely misspoke. I think because it was my 3rd or 4th attempt at recording it, I was beginning to a little bit, yes, punch drunk, I think is probably the closest. So, there are various different things I tried with this. So there's the plain weave at the top. Obviously you can see I used a warp which was regularly repeating stripes, and so where I've used a weft of the same colour you've got a solid block, and where the weft is of the opposite colour you get this patterned square. And then I've tried what are called warp floats, so these were staggered dots. You can see them more clearly on the lighter fabric. And then I tried something else called a honeycomb, and again this would work better if all of the warp threads were the same colour and were the same colour as the background of the honeycomb block, so that the outlines. So if I'd done all of the warp threads as the pale blue, then the turquoise blue would have created this pattern all the way across. You can actually see it has created the pattern, but it's a little bit hit and miss because the colours aren't contrasting in the right way. And then further down, so I did varying patches of, and these are continuous blocks of the same colouring weft, and these are as well. That's in the darker blue and the lighter blue, and then these are alternating colours of the weft, and it just creates different looks. And then at the very beginning I had tried my hand at effectively tapestry style weaving, and made these cute little houses. I need to weave in all the ends. You can see that the edges are quite wobbly. When the material first comes off the loom, it's what's known as a web, where you can actually see and feel that the lumps and bumps as the weft goes over and under the warp, and the warp goes under and over the weft. After taking it off the loom, and I used the overcaster on my new sewing machine, I stitched the edges of the weft so that they didn't come out. And that's created quite a strong boundary. After doing that, I then filled a bowl with hot soapy water and just agitated it a little, but left it to soak for an hour or so. Then squeezed it out using a towel as an absorbent mat, and dried it lay flat, and that's produced a fabric which doesn't have the lumpiness and bumpiness. The threads settle into each other and create a very, very attractive feeling cloth, especially given that these are both just basic acrylic threads. There's nothing particularly luxurious or attractive about them. They're fairly bog standard acrylic yarns, and even with those it's created quite a nice fabric. So I've got a couple of ideas about what I'm going to put this material towards. It requires a little bit of planning because I will need to use a temporary stitching on each side of the material where I cut it. So I need to decide where I'm going to cut it, then stitch on both sides of it in order to hold the weft threads together. So I'll probably use the pale blue cotton to do that before I cut it, and once I've cut it I can then use it as a normal piece of material. So I just need to think about what I want to do, but I'll probably make a couple of pouches, maybe try a few things, a little bit of experimentation. Now if you'll excuse me, I'll just try this honeybush tea for my first time. It smells very nice. Ooh, that's really rather nice. It's difficult to describe what it is, really. It's very tasty. It's quite a golden colour. It's very nice. Yes. Anyway, very mellow flavour as it goes down. So that's my only finished object, kind of, this week. I do have my usual whips, but the one I've been working mostly on, and I have been working on the Jolly Roger flag, but I'll talk about that later as part of the acquisitions. I've been working on my jumper. I'm nearly at the end of my raglan increases now, so you can see I've got quite a sizable article already. So this will be the yoke, and that's the shoulder panel. I think you can see the clear definition between the body of the jumper and this is a stripe that will come down over the shoulder and down the outside of the arm to the cuff. And it's just a garter stitch stripe, and there's a matching one on the other arm, so that will yeah, there it is. And you can see that there's a clear definition between the two different fabrics, and it will become more clear. So very shortly I will be putting a piece of waste yarn on a tapestry needle, and I will thread that through the live stitches for the arm and just leave that to the side, and then it will be a straight knit all the way down the body of the jumper, and then I'll finish off with a 1x1 rib and probably a tubular cast off, as I mentioned previously, and then go back and finish the arms off, the sleeves off each side. And again, they will just be tubular stitching down, remembering the panel on the outside of the arm sleeve, and then again tubular cast off at the wrists. It would be less significant to do a tubular cast off at the wrists and the bottom of the jumper, because the reason I needed it to be stretchy at the top is you have to get it over your head. It's the only way on, so it has to be stretchy enough to fit over, which, as I showed you last time, it certainly does. So I'm nearly through that ball of yarn, so that will be, it's time to cake up another skein. I've got 4 skeins of that, so I've plenty still. It feels so soft though, and I love the tweedy effect. So that's the colourway is called Oak Tweed, and because it's still got the oils in the wool, the natural oils, it's very soft and leaves your hands feeling soft afterwards, which is a good job really, because last week I cut my thumb on the slicer on the edge of a tin foil, aluminium foil box, which is fine. It bled a little and then it stopped and it's healed, but my thumbprint is clearly still slightly off, skew-if, because my phone won't activate using my thumbprint, so I'm having to swipe and type in my password every time, which is a little bit tedious. It's not the end of the world, obviously, but it's a bit tedious. So yes, so that's really it for finished objects and whips, works in progress. Oh, and it's Lion brand Fisherman's Wool. Lion brand Fisherman's Wool. I keep saying Lions because of the Lions coffee shops and Lions milk bars and all the rest of it. My step-grandfather's surname was Lions, so it's kind of in my head, but it's Lion brand, as in R, not as in, well, with the Y. So, acquisitions. Yeah, I've been a bad boy. Well, I've again, a few things have had to come from overseas, so it takes a little longer for them to arrive. But the most important thing this week is my worlds have collided. So my yarn world meets my love of all things Doctor Who. And here we have my Dalek stitch markers. And they are lovely. They really are. They're a little on the heavy side, which is a bit strange, but then I've tried them on the stitches and they're not pulling, so they're just heavier than the ones I normally have. But I also have, oops, sorry, stop it swinging. That is a sonic screwdriver. So it goes that way up, really. As you can see, it's got the buttons, and this pops up with the light shining and the sonic sound, I guess. A little bit of a lazy one. This it's just a clock face, but it's a very attractive clock face, and I think it's just because Doctor Who's about time, and for Americans, Doctor Who is all about Britain. So there we have the lovely Big Ben, or as it's properly known, Elizabeth Tower, as it was named after Her Majesty the Queen to celebrate her Diamond Jubilee on the throne. Another Dalek. This is much lighter, and as you can see, is not patterned on the reverse, so it's just a front impression. A scarf for Tom Baker, presumably, although he wasn't the only Doctor to wear a scarf. Sylvester McCoy liked his as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, my TARDIS, which is very pretty indeed. I'll just see if I can stop it swinging. There we are. That's a very attractive little item. And they all came in a lovely care package, this lovely bag. And again, a little Hershey's chocolate bar, which was very tasty. Oh, I also bought, on the same website, 3, I think they are just the most adorable little sheep you can imagine. So that I have 3 of those. All standing together, so those are lovely little stitch markers, so I shall enjoy using those. And they came with the usual card, which is Gloria Partray Spin and Knit on Etsy, and she's given me these lovely buttons as well, which have the pattern on one side and a white on the other, and another little stitch marker made with love, which is very nice. So that's very pleasant. Just put those away while I talk. So yes, so now my life is complete. When worlds have collided, I have everything Doctor Who, everything Walking Dead, and everything Stitch and Craft. So that's lovely. I also bought some very pretty owl stitch markers. I've discovered I really like owls. I hadn't realised. It's funny what you discover about yourself when you start looking at things and doing things. So these are the owl stitch markers. And lovely little faces, and in the different colours on one side and solid colour on the back. And they're all very similar in appearance but different colours. And these ones are for knitting because they fit over the knitting needle there, and you just knit around. They're useful for, like with the jumper, where I'm marking the beginning of the row, where I marked the points at which I do the raglan increase, and also the points at which the garter stitch panel on the sleeves begins and ends, so that I don't have to count. So they're very useful for that. I've got another set identical to these, but with the lobster clasp, which allows me to then attach them to specific stitches, which is much more useful for crochet, where you don't have a knitting needle in order to preserve the beginning and end. So I have another bag of them. They're there, but as you can see, they have the lobster clasp. Lobster claw clasp, I think it's called, actually. And the person who made them is Diana Shan Crafts, and that's her card, and she can also be found on Etsy. And they're very nice. And then finally, I had what is very sweetly called my purple package day. Literally, a purple package. It came in a purple envelope, wrapped in purple tissue paper, which is very nice to see that kind of coordinated. And they're from Crafty Cats Knitty Bits, I think they're called. Yes, there we are, Crafty Cats Knitty Bits, from a manufacturer in Bristol. And again, she was the one who gave me the tea bag. So that was quite nice. It's obviously something that people who do crafts like their cups of tea. So I've noticed a lot of podcasters talk about the tea that they're drinking. Excuse me. And I bought two things from her. The first was another set of stitch markers, and these are actually the numbers of 0 to 9 twice. So it's 20 stitch markers. They're very sweet, very attractive, and as you can see, they've got numbers on, which will help with more complicated patterns and keeping track of which particular part of the pattern you're doing. And this was a little extra that came with with those stitch markers, which is very sweet. So that's the stitch markers, but the other thing I bought was a hand-dyed yarn. Her company is Purple Paw Yarns, and this is it. And would you just look at this? It's very different. Actually, those colours are fairly good, given that it's artificial light. That's actually pretty much what I'm seeing on the iPad. It's hand painted, so it's one of a kind. It's called Storm in a Cauldron, which is a lovely, vivid picture. Nice little stitch marker attached as well, so that's very sweet. I always like to have the little freebies on top. This is I think I'm right, it will be on the back. Oh, there we are. No, it's on the front. Just find my glasses. There they are. Age catches up with most of us eventually. So this is a 4-ply yarn. It's 75% superwash merino wool and 25% nylon. And it's 100 grams, so it will make socks. If you make socks just out of wool, they'll be very soft and comfortable. But in fact, your toes and heels will wear out very quickly. I can't see distance if I wear the glasses, but I can't read without them, so I have to keep taking them off and putting them on again. So yes, if you don't use something like nylon in the wool that you use, every time you put them on, take them off and wear them and walk in them and do whatever else you do during the day, it wears down the toes and the heels very quickly, and then you're constantly darning them and they're not as pristine and wonderful as they were. A small amount of nylon does a lot of good and doesn't affect the... Oh, so lovely. It's completely non-scratchy. But I cannot wait to cake this up. I mean, look at those turquoises in there. And the greens around here. I can't wait to see what this looks like. once I actually start using it. So I'm really looking forward to doing that. I will start making some socks with that, I think, soon. So that was the last thing that came in the post. I then went to Masons. I know I shouldn't go to Masons. It's a mistake I always make, and I go in and I can't resist. So I've actually been in twice this week, and I walked in the door, and this is what I saw. Now, can you see? Yes, you can. You can see that this is a tonal colour. So it's not a solid dye. You can actually see that it's got more dye in some places than in others. So the shade is maintained, but the depth of colour is different, which gives it its own sense of texture. This is so soft. It's this is 60% merino, 25% alpaca, and 15% silk. It's a DK weight, so it's double the weight of the 4-ply that I've just shown you. Having said what I've just said about nylon, silk is the natural alternative to nylon. It is incredibly strong, so you'll very often find in the more luxury end of the market that silk will be used as preference over nylon. And it dyes, it helps, having different fibres in here means that you get a different effect with the same dye, because of the dye uptake differences between the different fibres. This is produced by, I don't know if, I don't, there we are, that might be better. There's a light over there that's giving me most of the definition of what's going on. This is by a company called Mirasol in Peru. This is their Catcher base, and the colourway is Sunshine. I have a second Mirasol Peru yarn, and that's this one. This is their Hummingbird colourway. This is 100% wool. It's also DK weight, and it's got these lovely reds and greens with a dark blue tweed kind of effect. This is 100% wool, so I won't be using this for socks, but it may well make a very nice scarf or hat, or scarf and hat combination. I've got a couple of schemes of this. And again, this is the same company, but this is their Sami base, which is 100% wool. Mirasol is the Spanish word for sunflower, which is their emblem. You can see it's a stylized sunflower with Mirasol written around in the middle. It's a cooperative in Peru, which operates under the fair trade principles. It's a fair trade organisation. The women raise the animals that provide the fibres, and they carry out all the processes of carding and weaving, spinning, weaving, dyeing. So they make their own fabrics as well as their own yarns. It was founded in 2006, and by 2007 was generating enough income to start the foundation of a new school for their children. So it's a cooperative which is funding community activities and funding education and providing gainful employment for people in rural areas in Peru. So that's a very positive thing to know. And as I say, it's fair trade, so they're getting a fair price for their product. It's not all going to the middlemen who distribute it to the various stores. And I have another yarn that I bought, which is very similar to Mirasol, but this is Manos. This is their Silk Blend Fino, which is a 70% merino wool, 30% silk. So whereas the other had some alpaca in it, this is really even softer, and rather than being tonal, and you are getting a good representation again of the colours, rather than being tonal, this has, I don't know if it's striped or variegated at the moment, because I'll have to cake it up to see whether or not they're long enough to be striped, or whether it's just a variegated yarn, but there's purples, vermilion, crimson, scarlet. It's a really, really interesting looking wool. It's incredibly soft. This is probably the softest wool I've ever had. As I say, it's a 75-25, sorry, 70-30 merino silk. And rather nicely, again, this is based in Uruguay, but it's the same principle as Mirasol. It's a cooperative to help the rural communities, particularly the women in rural communities, to have employment and to provide for their families and provide community resources. And rather nicely, they actually tell you who the person is, who, in this case, actually just says artisan, so I believe that this is Roja, in Fraile Muerto. I don't know if I'm saying that properly, but that's what it looks like. And she is the artisan, so she will have spun and dyed this wool. This is in their flame colourway, and it really is beautiful, and this will make lovely socks, so I'm looking forward to using that as well. The other things, the Aran I bought is just another large ball of the Woolcraft Aran double knit. Aran weight. It's slightly thicker than the Stylecraft Aran, which is very useful for this blanket that I'm making, the Jolly Roger. I was running out of the black because obviously it's a black background, and I want to put a black border around it as well to make it slightly more substantial. It's 100% acrylic, which means the child isn't going to. It doesn't matter what they do to it; they're not going to ruin the item because it's machine washable at 40 degrees, and you can wring it out. It's not going to felt. So hopefully it will be fine. And then my final acquisitions today. I had to go into Masons for a friend. You know who you are. You are watching this video. You know who you are. It is your fault. You made me go. And having gone into one mason shop, I then had to go into the yarn shop, didn't I? I couldn't not. I think it was on Wednesday or Thursday this week, Masons put on their Facebook page that they had got a new delivery of a new item from Sirdar, which is their colour wheel, which is an 80% acrylic, 20% wool base. I don't think it says what type of wool. No, I don't think so. It's not saying there. No, it just literally says wool. So I have no idea what type of wool it is, so it will just be wool. This is their Deep Blue Sea colourway. It's a DK weight. It's 150 grams, so it's 520 metres or so. And I bought another one, which is their Colorama colourway. Again, it's still the 80% acrylic and 20% wool, DK weight. And with them, as you see in the top here, it actually says free wrap pattern. In fact, I got two different patterns, each of which has 2 patterns on it, so that's 4 patterns effectively. This is a wrap which is knitted, so it's either a triangular wrap or a wrap, depending which one you wish to do. And this one is either a triangular wrap crocheted or a ripple scarf crocheted. And both, well, all 4 items use exactly one full 150 gram ball of wool from Sirdar. So I shall look forward to making those. I just love these two. They're just really, it's incredibly soft as well. I mean, it's really squeezy, and it actually feels like there's a lot more wool than just 20% in there. It really has a very wool-like texture. I think modern acrylics are probably, there are some which are very second-rate, but many modern acrylics, I think, are suffering from a negative comparison with proper luxury hand-painted, hand-spun yarns. And you can tell the difference. You really can tell the difference. If you have the two products next to you, you can immediately feel and see the difference between mass-produced and therefore cheaper acrylics and acrylic mixes, and the hand-spun, hand-dyed artisan product. But horses for courses, you know, does the item, if you're not wearing the item against your skin, does it need to be as lovely as a, you know, fine wool and silk mix as this is? This is going to be worn against my feet, it's going to be against my feet for a long time, whereas this is going to be worn on the outside of clothing and is only going to be worn for possibly a few hours at most, rather than all day. So, you know, I think you have to cut your cloth, as it were, accordingly. Decide what you want to be able to do, and then what you can afford to pay and what you're prepared to pay, and then don't worry about anything else. I think probably that's the biggest thing. Just make your own decisions and decide for yourself, and who cares what anybody else thinks? Excuse me. That is a really lovely tea. It's very mild. It's not got that bitter edge of normal tea, but it's still got that kind of the tweaker flavour in the back of the head almost. So it's very mild. It's almost, it's kind of like a full-bodied Darjeeling, I think is how I'd probably describe it. It's got that kind of very gentle flavour, very mild flavour of a Darjeeling, but has the strength of character that's more like an Assam. Anyway, what do I know about tea? I sit here sounding as if I'm some kind of expert on anything, but that's just my experiences. I also, while I was in the fabric shop, I was standing at the till minding my own business, and I saw this lovely fabric of sewing machines, fat quarter, so I bought it. I think I know what I want to use it for. It's about the right size, so I think I've got a good idea what I'm going to use that for, but it was just, I couldn't resist. It cost next to nothing, so it wasn't an expensive purchase. And very pleasantly, I wasn't aware this would happen. I bought my new sewing machine and my loom that I showed last week from Create and Craft on TV, and I became a member because there's a 10% discount, and it applies to the order that you're purchasing at the time you're purchasing, so it was a significant saving on the... sorry, I didn't get the loom from them. I got the sewing machine and... excuse me a second. I got the sewing machine and some embroidery yarn. Embroidery thread. I've got yarn on the brain. Embroidery thread is a little bit different from normal thread in that there's a kind of metallic sheen, so that even after it's been through the machine and you ironed it in order to fix the stitching and get rid of any puckering that might have happened because of the process, it still has this luster. So it's quite attractive thread. This is a starter kit. It's actually a much bigger box than there are threads, but there's a very nice range of colours there, so I can get going on my... I don't quite have an embroidery machine, but I do have decorative stitches on the machine and stitches that will do double stitching as well. So there's an opportunity for a form of embroidery rather than embroidery proper. So I just thought it was worth investing in some. So I got those at the same time I got the sewing machine. Those are the two things I bought. And this week I received my first edition of the Create and Craft Club. The Create and Craft Club is, I think, what it's called. Anyway, that's the magazine. It's full of the kinds of things you'd expect it to be full of. I mean, some of the things I'm not really interested in, the card making and so on. It's never been... As children, we used to make cards at Christmas. from our Christmas cards from the previous year, and we had glue and glitter everywhere. It was wonderful. Enjoyed doing that. But generally speaking, I buy handmade cards. I'm not really I'm not attracted to the craft of making my own cards. My mum used to make cards before she suffered from Alzheimer's, and they were very nice, and I used to buy some off her to give as cards at Christmas as well. So that's arrived, so that's very nice. That was the last thing. I thought I might talk a little bit more about knitting terminology. So I had candid crochet last week. I think we'll just have to call it candid knitting. There are two words which crop up time and time again on YouTube videos, and both are to do with when you've made a mistake and you want to undo some of your fabric back to the point at which you made the mistake, or maybe to get rid of it completely. So if you've made a mistake on the row on which you're working and you want to just work back to that point, you do something that's known as tink, and which is basically, if you've knitted a stitch, then you unknit it, or if you purled it, then you bring the yarn forward and go back in to the back of the stitch in the same way that you brought it off the needle in the first place. And the reason it's called tink is because it's knit backwards. T-I-N-K is K-I-N-I-T. So you're just undoing what you've done. It only works to a limited extent, and particularly really only going back on the same row that you're on already. Once you turn the work, or if you're using magic loop, once you're working on the other side, it's just a nightmare. At that point, you would do what's known as frogging, and you can frog something back down several lines of knit, or you can completely frog a project if it's something that you decided you're not interested in, or it's gone hopelessly wrong from the start, and you might as well just start the whole thing again. And the reason it's called frog is because you rip it. And if you rip it a lot, then you'll rip it, as in ribbit, 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 and that's the sound of a frog, and so it's called frogging. I thought it was amusing. I thought I'd share it with you. It will be of marginal interest to most people, but I thought it was funny, so I thought I'd share it. So, recommendations. In terms of podcasts, because of the weaving, there are two people in particular that I've started following. One person, Kelly Casanova, is where I got the idea for the houses, and she's very good on the small scale stuff. She has a pay-for tutorial channel, but she puts some of the bare minimum stuff on her unpaid YouTube channel. And at the moment, I'm fine with the unpaid stuff, but there may be a point at which I want to actually develop some skill set further. And she is a very good teacher, even from the limited exposure that her free channel gives of her. But she's very methodical and clear, so it may well be worth, at some point in the future, paying the small subscription in order to support her in what she's doing, but also to further my own skill set. But the main podcast that I've been watching, it's not really a podcast, it's more tutorials as well. But I watch this more as if it were a podcast rather than as a tutorial for me, because the person's username is Curmudgeon66. And he is a retired person now living in Wisconsin. He was born in Wisconsin, but he's now retired to a lovely house in Wisconsin. And he has a number of different types of looms, including floor looms as well, so he has the whole range. And I just find watching him going about his weaving work, I actually find that quite soothing and therapeutic, as well as my own weaving. So whether he has a very relaxed style, it's a very nice accent as well. I mean, it's not strong, it's a Midwest accent, quite literally. But I just find him a very interesting person to listen to, and I just enjoy watching him work. He's also a baker. He also is quite involved in the local community, and particularly in the local community orchestra, so there are often uploads of performances. So it's worth, he's not quite a Renaissance man, but he has, like me, many interests beyond the weaving. I have watched some TV other than The Walking Dead, you'll be pleased to hear, although I have watched The Walking Dead, and yes, I'm thoroughly enjoying it, and most people didn't seem to like last weekend's, for me in the UK, Monday's episode, and I thought it was a really interesting character study, and clearly we're building up to the finale in the last 2 episodes of this particular season. But I have watched other TV, as I say. I watched all 5 episodes of SSGB last weekend, which is based on a Len Deighton novel, and it was fine. Sam Riley was excellent. He played the superintendent, the lead character, who's a British man answering to a German supervisor who's in charge of the Metropolitan Police Division that he's working in. And is seconded to an SS officer for reasons to do with what's going on in the storyline. It's the storyline is fine. It's clever. My understanding of German and British politics of the war era is that had Hitler invaded Britain, he would have removed George VI from power and put Edward VIII back on the throne with his Queen Wallis Simpson. That seems to have been... It's certainly the case that Edward VIII was a fascist sympathiser. So the fundamental plot of the story seemed a bit weak. But then I suppose it wasn't quite the fundamental plot of the story, but it was a key element of the plot, was trying to smuggle George VI out of England. I'm just not sure why that would have been considered the best. I thought it was a weak element to the plot. But it was interesting to see Nazi oppression on the streets of London, and how that would have manifested itself. So, as I say, Sam Riley was very good. I just was a little disappointed. And I also watched Replacements, which was a 3-episode thriller series. I think it's... The Replacement was about a woman who was the maternity cover for an architect who had just won a prestigious contract for her architect's firm. And it descends into murder and paranoia. And I was disappointed because actually the conceits for the series of using the fact that she was maternity cover and that the woman was having a baby and therefore was hormonal, I thought that was a bit lazy, to be perfectly honest. I think if you were going to use maternity and pregnancy and postnatal depression as plot points, then they really ought to be more substantial plot points, and I don't think they really were. It was a bog standard thriller. The ending was pointless. It appeared to imply that the woman who died was assumed to have committed suicide because her husband had said that he was jealous of her friend, who was the main character, because she was able to have a baby. In fact, the woman was murdered by the maternity leave replacement for reasons that I'm not entirely convinced about. And then the final scene appeared to be... Well, the final scene was the main character at the grave of the woman who had been killed, along with the woman's now older child, and the dead woman's husband smiling down from a short distance away, as if they were now in a relationship. It was left very unclear, but it also seemed to be such a weak conclusion. I was hoping for a much more interesting examination of workplace paranoia, of the psychological effect of pregnancy and childbirth, and how one can be misconstrued for the other, but that it might have been legitimate. It was okay. I wouldn't say it was. The acting was fine, the direction was fine. I just think the storyline was a bit weak, and I thought it was a missed opportunity, and I thought it was a bit lazy. So the sum total of my recommendations for TV this week is don't watch either of the above. Just stick to The Walking Dead. And in 2 weeks' time, Doctor Who will return to our screens. So, 3 weeks' time, sorry. Yippee! So that will be on Holy Saturday evening, the day before Easter Sunday. So that's more or less it. I seem to be surrounded by cats at the moment. Toby has come and sat between me and the camera, which is his normal. He likes to see himself. And Bunty appears to be wanting to jump up. Bunty, come on. There we go. No? No? Okay. She's wandered off. But Toby's here. Oh, no, typical woman. She's now changed her mind. She's coming up anyway. There we are. There's Toby and Bunty together in the same picture. Isn't that lovely? Well, I think this is probably the right moment for me to say thank you for watching. And I hope you've not been too bored by my ramblings. And I will hopefully have something more for you next week. Goodbye.